You're listening to Humans in Tech. Our podcast explores today's most transformative technology and the trends of tomorrow, bringing together the brightest minds in and outside of our industry. We unpack what's new in physical access, identity verification, cybersecurity, and IoT ecosystems. We reach beyond the physical world, discuss our digital transformation as a species, and dive into the emerging phygital experience. Join us on our journey as we discover just how connected the future will be and how we will fit into that picture. Your host is Lee Dow, VP of Global Marketing at Identiv.
Thank you for tuning in. Today we're joined by John Guerrero, CEO of Identify Systems. Hi, John.
Hello, Lee. How you doing?
Great. You're here to discuss authentication solutions in criminal justice information systems, a space where Identiv definitely plays a role. So all federal and state law enforcement personnel are required to follow the CJIS Mandate to access specific information. What is the mandate and why was it created?
So the FBI introduced integrated presidential directives and federal laws and FBI directives and the criminal justice community decisions creating the CJIS Mandate. The mandate was given, or what I guess I should say, was created to give law enforcement agencies quick and secure access to systems that provide information from anywhere at any time while protecting the information and users' ID from cyber criminals or any persons not allowed to access this information. One of the most common use cases for the CJIS mandate would be a police officer is in his patrol car and he pulls over a vehicle. The officer can use his secure access to log to information that gives him background on vehicles, background on the vehicle owner. The information can tell the officer if the vehicle is properly titled or stolen, or even if the owner has a clean record or if they have a warrant out for the arrest. This is all information that the police officer needs to access in a very secure and timely manner to keep himself and potentially anybody in the vehicle safe.
What are some of the most effective ways to keep law enforcement agencies and citizens safe in the criminal justice system?
Well, I hate to sound like a cliche or a tech nerd, but information is the key. And we have to protect citizens and law enforcement by keeping the right information secure. For example, at any given time, there are hundreds of law enforcement agencies, law enforcement officers that are working undercover to thwart the bad element of our society. And can you imagine what would happen if a list of these officers who put their lives on the line would be released to the very same criminals they're trying to bring to justice? Nothing good could come from this.
I think one of the things that I've found really interesting and that the average citizen probably doesn't know is, the access that law enforcement has to national databases of information. So, for instance, I think most people don't realize that most law enforcement agencies and police officers have access to things like air travel information and things like that. So I've always found that interesting that most people probably don't know what information they have access to, but it is outlined and mandated by the federal government.
Yeah, the information that they have access to is vast, and it's understandable why it needs to be secure. I mean, there's a lot of data out there that people need to keep private, whether it's for their benefit, for the benefit of their family, or the benefit of law enforcement themselves. I mean, you really don't want this information falling into the wrong hands.
What is CJIS Compliance? And you said it's called CJIS.
Yeah, the acronym, is CJIS, but people's, in their necessity to shorten, quicken things, just have referred to it as CJIS. But there are different aspects of the CJIS mandate. However, the purpose of the discussion that we're having here, I'm specifically speaking to the piece that requires law enforcement agencies to identify and authenticate themselves that are accessing the information systems and processes that are available to them. Each individual's identity has to be authenticated at either the local agency level, the CJIS systems agency level, the state identification bureaus level, or at the Chandler level. And the authentication strategy should be part of the agency's audit for policy compliance. And the FBI CJIS division also identifies and authenticates all individuals who establish direct web-based interactive sessions with the FBI CJIS services.
What are some of the standard authenticators, advanced authentication, and risk-based authentication methods?
So all different types of authenticators. The standard ones are basically going to be passwords, hard or soft tokens, biometrics, OTP, things of that nature, PINs. When you moved into the advanced authentication, authenticators, you're getting more into biometrics, smart cards, PKI infrastructure solutions, FIDO U2F or FIDO2 security keys. And then you have the risk-based authentication, and that's more network information, user information, or high-risk challenge response questions there.
As we know in this industry, criminals and conspirators are constantly trying to stay many, many steps ahead and trying to dupe people out of their private information. What would you say is an effective way to increase security for this?
Well, I say across the board, the best way to increase security is going to be using a multi-factor authentication solution. It's been deemed not only in the federal space or the state and local agencies, but in the enterprise space as well as one of the most effective ways to increase security. The process where you add more than one authenticator, especially from the ones that we previously mentioned, to the authentication process. So the more authenticators you require, the more secure your information is. And there has to be a line drawn though. Too many authenticators and you take away that timely part of accessing the information. So if you make somebody type in a PIN, use their smart card and use a FIDO key and use a soft token, well, that's going to take some time. But when the reality situation is you can really focus it down to 2 or 3 authentication methods based on the use case of where they're trying to access the information and make it a very seamless and quick as well as secure authentication.
What is a recurrent strategy for multi-factor authentication?
For MFA, it's to use software applications or physical devices. They generate a unique one-time password that has limits on how long it's viable. And what's proven to be the most effective secure method is to add a physical device requirement to the authentication process, like a smart card or a FIDO key, along with any other form of authentication or authenticator that we mentioned earlier. This means without the actual possession of that physical authenticator, you can't access the information at all.
So what are some of the use cases for first responders and Justice Department officials?
Well, if I can revert back to my earlier use case of the patrol officer in his vehicle, each officer has a laptop in their vehicle that they use to access the CJIS information systems while in the field. To authenticate to this network, the officer must follow the MFA requirements. And they typically right now enter a PIN, a password, and also tap his or her smart card, which is also their ID badge, or a FIDO token onto a smart card reader or an NFC reader to be granted access. And if any of the authenticators are denied or missing, then access isn't granted. And using that tap method is a very quick and seamless way for them to get the information. The last thing you want is an officer struggling to spend time authenticating to get the information while something is going on that's beyond their control in the vehicle in front of them or in a building in front of them, or even just standing there as a passerby walking by. You want to make sure that everything's accessed quickly, securely, and in a timely manner to keep everybody safe.
What are some steps businesses should absolutely take to ensure their data is secure?
Well, the MFA requirement by the CJIS Mandate is governed by a federal agency. It's the FBI and the criminal justice system. And in my opinion, it's the absolute best requirement for all business practices, whether the business is small or an enterprise organization. It's proven to be one of the most effective ways to secure information and protect user identities. And some of the authenticators that we're speaking of, like the FIDO2 keys, whether it's either by FIDO2, or the FIDO standard, the federal government in the NIST agency has verified that they're one of the strongest authentication methods that are out there and available, and the best way to secure your solution, secure your data. It's again, I'll go back to the whole physical possession of the device. So if you have the device in your hand, then it's impossible for a hacker, whether they be in Russia, in China, in Arkansas, in your next town over, to access that information without the key that's physically in your possession. And even if you lost that key, for whatever reason it was stolen, you still are required to have another authentication method to access the information. So whether you're accessing CJIS or you're accessing your company's IP information, or you're just on your network looking, or on the business network looking at resources that are available, you want to make sure that it's secure, and using MFA typically it is.
How does Identiv support MFA for CJIS compliance?
Well, Identiv has been manufacturing various secure authenticators and credentials for decades. These devices are being used globally in numerous government and enterprise authentication practices. And as you know, Identiv has been the leading supplier of smart card readers to the U.S. government since the inception of HSPD 12. This means that there are millions of active and retired users in the U.S. that possess and use the Identiv device as part of their authentication process. To me, that speaks so highly of the company and the product. It's amazing.
Well, thank you for joining us today, John. It's always a pleasure to talk shop with you. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And as for the rest of the audience, if you like this podcast, please like and subscribe. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you, Lee. Take care.
Our new IP-rated contactless smart card reader writer is perfect for clean rooms and industrial facilities. UTrust 3700 IG combines the world-class technology of UTrust 3700F with a unique industrial-grade dust-proof, water-resistant enclosure, crafted with polished, high-grade plastics and ultrasonic welded seams. It stays clean inside and out. Learn more at Identiv.com. Eliminate the risk of data breaches, phishing, password theft, and replay attacks with hardened multi-factor authentication cybersecurity. Passwordless logins are simple and secure with UTrust FIDO2 NFC Plus security keys. Insert the device, tap the button, and get secure access. It really is that easy. Learn more at Identiv.com. Physical security, identity verification, the IoT. The hyperconnectivity of our lives will only grow more pervasive. As technology becomes more automated and experiences more augmented, it's up to us to preserve our humanity and use new tools and trends for good. The only question is, are we up for the challenge?